Hey everyone, if you're wondering what evidence is going to ruin your personal injury case, this is the podcast that you need to listen to. I'm Michael Coker, this is Samantha Ball, and we're personal injury lawyers in Lawrenceville, Georgia, and we're going to give you all the secrets that you need to know. Today we have an important discussion, and that's the evidence that is going to ruin your personal injury case. And so we're going to talk about a few different things and a few different ways that you might ruin your personal injury case without even realizing it. And so I'm going to start with Samantha. Samantha, what if you had to give a list of the top thing that ruins a personal injury case, what would you say that was?
Social media.
How so? Can you describe that a bit?
Everyone nowadays, this is just the time where everybody shares everything on social media. And I'm not even talking about an accident, right? Or their injuries. They're not necessarily sharing things about what actually happened in the collision or what happened in the case where they fell somewhere. I'm talking about their everyday life that they're sharing that negates the pain that they say they're in, right? So I had a case one time where the client was claiming that, it wasn't actually my case. I had to watch this case when I was working for a judge, but the client was claiming back pain, right? And the plaintiff's attorney was saying that it was like debilitating back pain, that they couldn't, do anything. And the defense lawyer, right after he says that with the client, after the testimony comes, the defense lawyer puts up a video of this particular person after the incident dancing on a table, twerking. Their back seemed fine, So that's one that just sticks out in my mind always, because you just think, oh, no one's looking at my social media. Defense lawyers are looking at your social media.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Constantly.
And I've had many cases. I've had great clients that have ruined their cases because they posted, a video of them skiing down a ski slope, but then claimed to have all these knee injuries.
Correct.
Or, on a tubing behind a boat and getting flung 20 feet in the air, right? Well, that's a pretty big argument that you might have re-injured your back doing that instead of in the car wreck. So I agree 100% with social media. And for anybody who's watching that has a personal injury case, I usually recommend the first thing is obviously set your social media to private, right? If you're somebody who has your social media that anyone and everyone can see it, that's great that you want to try to be an Instagram star and have everybody see you. But if you have a personal injury case, just know that insurance company is 100% combing through your social media. But even so, even if you set it to private, ultimately, when you get to trial, they're going to ask for copies of all those photographs, right? They're going to ask for copies to see what you've posted, what you've been doing that's physical, to argue against the fact that you're truly hurt. And so just know that's coming. And so if you can take a 6-month, 1-year hiatus from social media, not post, or maybe you could always go on there and post happy birthday or photos of your children or something like that. But definitely don't post you on these elaborate trips doing these ultra physical things unless you want it to be used against you in court. And so I agree with that.
Right.
So the second thing that I would say that ruins your personal injury case is basically not going to your medical appointments. Nothing tells an insurance company, hey, I'm not really hurt, like not showing up to the doctor. And I'll tell you this is that, so in my lifetime, I've had, issues with my back and problems. And I can tell you that there were appointments that were made maybe a month or 2 months out because that was as soon as the doctor could see me. And I waited daily for those appointments because I was in very bad pain and there was no way I was missing that appointment. Now, sometimes life happens and something crazy comes up, and we understand that. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you have an appointment that's scheduled and then you don't show up to it, to me, that sends a message not just to the insurance company, but to your own lawyers that, this isn't a priority for you. You're not really as injured as maybe you're saying you are. And so I would hate for somebody who has a legitimate injury for the insurance company to use that against them because maybe they just didn't know or didn't understand that, oh, that matters. Like showing up to physical therapy, showing up to doctor's offices when you have an appointment. That sends a message both to the insurance company, to your lawyers, and to the jury that you're really hurt. And let's say you're going to physical therapy and it's not helping, right? Let's say you're going and it's not helping. Tell them that, okay? Tell them that. Ask for other options. talk to your doctors about it. Don't just stop going, because if you stop going, they're going to say that's what's called non-cooperation, that you haven't done what the doctors have told you. And then ultimately, they're going to turn around and say that you're not really hurt like you should be. Anything you'd
Right.
add about those doctors?
The other thing I would say is it's okay to get a second opinion.
Sure.
I think a lot of people are scared sometimes in their treatment, or they think, is it going to mess up my case if I get a second opinion? No, because that's what anybody would do in a regular circumstance. I mean, if you're getting a surgery or you're going through something that you're going to have to be put under for, it's normal to get a second opinion. So go ahead and get one, and see which doctor you agree with more, because a lot of times, just because they're a doctor, every doctor practices differently. So
Yeah. Anything else you would think of what ruins a personal injury case?
I would say another thing that ruins personal injury cases that people don't think of a lot is your behavior after an accident, right? So there's a lot of times dash cam footage or the police body cam footage, right? If you have a person that's so pissed off that they got, injured or hit or whatever, but they're going crazy and screaming and acting like a lunatic, and then later they're like, it's debilitating pain. It just, the way that you are perceived is important when it comes to being in front of a jury, because as much as everyone's like, oh, it's the judicial system, they're judging you. I mean, that's just the reality. They're judging you, and they want to know the science behind the injury, right? So they're going to, make a determination about your case based on you a lot of the times.
I couldn't agree more. And yeah, I mean, we've had that happen too, where I've been sitting in a courtroom and we're in front of a jury, and all the insurance defense lawyer does is go over and press play on a video that's up on the screen and just shows my client just either cussing out the other driver,
Yep.
or acting like just a complete fool at the scene. And
Mm-hmm.
that is something that a jury never gets over, right? They never
No.
say, like, even if it wasn't your fault and you're angry, and we understand people get angry after an accident.
And
We get
legitimate
it.
injuries too.
100%.
Sometimes you have legitimate injuries, but a jury just is like puts blinders on after they
100%,
see
because
things like
because
that.
a jury, if they don't like you, if they don't trust
Mhm.
you, then they're not going to award you what you deserve, right? And so
Right.
the immediate way to cause them to not trust you, not like you, is to act like that after an accident. And I could not agree more. I think that's a huge thing. The third thing I'll say of ways you can ruin your personal injury case is talking to the insurance company after an accident. You need to assume that every phone call that you have with an insurance company is being recorded after an accident. And they are just dying to get you to say something or do something that hurts your case.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's your insurance company, people are very surprised by that. Well, I'm talking to my insurance company. They're on my side. They're not on your side, okay? They might end up having to pay as well through part of an uninsured or underinsured motorist claim. And so they're immediately going to be gathering evidence against you, immediately working to prevent you from recovering everything that you're entitled to. And so these are trained professionals on the phone. They know the questions to ask you. They know the problems with, what you can and can't say. And so they're going to use that for their advantage. And so I'll give you a perfectly good example of that. Is one time I had a case, had a trial. We got all the way to court. We showed up, we were doing the trial, and the insurance lawyer pressed play on a phone recording with my client. And basically they were asking this woman questions, and they said, "Are you hurt?" And she said, like many of us do, "I'm fine." Right? I mean, she just said, "I'm fine." But even that, so they used that for the entirety of the rest of the trial and said she was fine. She told us she was fine. She said, "I'm fine." And so those two simple words, right? And again, she might have had neck pain. She might have had problems with her neck. But just like many of us, she just said, "I'm fine." And without realizing the effect of those words in that phone call was a major mistake and had a huge effect on her case. And so what I would tell you is, don't ever talk to the insurance company after an accident. Let the attorney handle that, because if the attorney talks on your behalf, then they're not going to be recording you and saying what you said back in the day and hurt your case. Because a lot of times in that moment, you don't know what's wrong with you. Adrenaline might be pumping.
Yeah.
You might not know that you have a serious injury, and you might say, "I'm fine," and then it ends up hurting the case later on. So that's the other one that I would say is my major concern. Basically, to don't speak to the insurance company because you just don't know what you may say.
Yeah.
Anything you'd add to that?
Well, I would say on a positive note, so I know we're talking a lot about of the negative parts of evidence for your case, but I would say on a positive note, something that has helped a lot of my cases recently is everyone having dash cams in their car. So I've had quite a few cases where the insurance company is trying to claim that my client was at fault, and then we get a dash cam footage from their vehicle showing that they weren't at fault. The other party was at fault, right? So they try to immediately deny a claim, which would have caused us to have to file suit if we weren't able to get it resolved pre-suit. And I've had a lot of success recently with clients who have the dash cam footage, and then they show it to us. We send it to the insurance company with our demands, and we're able to get their case resolved. So my best advice on those would be anytime you have the dash cam footage, be sure you save that for your attorney.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Dash cams are not expensive. You can get them on Amazon for very cheap now. So I would say go ahead and grab one of those, plug it into your USB drive in your car, and let it just record, because you never know when you're going to need that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had cases like Samantha said where the entire case was won because the person had a dash cam.
Right.
So I agree.
Same.
Yeah, 100%. And while we're on kind of the positive aspect of, what helps your case, we've talked so much about what ruins your case. The other thing that helps your case, in my opinion, is to be a person that tries to get better
Right.
after your injuries. Nobody on a jury likes to see somebody who's a malingerer, who has something happen to them and they say, oh, my life is over, I'm never going to do this again. Now, sometimes that's the reality, and sometimes that happens. But the best plaintiffs, the best clients that I have are the ones that have a serious injury that happens in their life, and yet they do everything they can to try to get back to some sense of normalcy in their life. They don't stay at home forever. They don't, never go outside their house again. Their life might be different and might need to be modified, but they still go out. And I'll give you an example. I had a young lady who, early in my career, who had lost a leg in an accident. And so she basically could have just said, I'm not doing anything again, but she didn't. She got fit for a prosthetic. She got back to running. She was a runner. She got back to running with the prosthetic. And that did not hurt her case. It helped her case, because what that showed is that she was somebody that jury was going to love and was going to root for. They wanted her to win. They wanted her to succeed, because what most of us would want to do if that happened to us is just sit on the couch and cry and do nothing, right? But that wasn't this woman, and that made her the best plaintiff, one of the best plaintiffs I've ever had, because she was willing to go out, start running again, start trying to get back to her life as best she could, and make the best of a terrible situation. And so that's the advice I would give is, if you're in a bad situation, don't think, oh, I'm going to help my case by staying at home and quitting my job and doing this. The best plaintiffs are the ones that try to get back to some sense of normalcy in their life, even if they have to modify it because of their injuries.
Yeah,
so
I would agree.
Yeah. Anything else you would add before we call it quits for today?
No, I think that is all that I would add. And I also would say to be careful who you talk about your case with, because, or your accident, because anytime a case gets brought to trial, they're going to ask you, who did you discuss this case with? What did you say? And if it's not your attorney, they can depose that person, and they can bring out some information that may not be good for you. So.
100%. 100%. Well, thank you, Sam. I think this is one of our best episodes. Some great advice there. If you have a personal injury case, what can ruin your case and what can make it substantially better. So if you like getting these updates, like learning more about Georgia law, like and subscribe to this podcast. Otherwise, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.